Everything you deny in yourself, you attract in others. Carl Jung said this, and if you've ever wondered why you keep falling for the same type of person who ends up hurting you, this single quote holds the key to understanding your entire romantic pattern. Right now, as you're watching this, there's a part of you that knows exactly what I'm talking about. That sinking feeling when you realize you've chose and someone who's going to break your heart again. In the exact same way as before. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever noticed this pattern repeating in your relationships. I want to hear from you, because what I'm about to share will change how you see love forever. You know that moment when you meet someone and there's this instant magnetic pull. You think it's chemistry. You think it's destiny. But according to Jung's revolutionary understanding of the human psyche, it's actually your unconscious mind recognizing something familiar, something wounded, something that matches perfectly with your deepest emotional scars. Here's what nobody talks about in those feel-good relationship advice videos. We don't fall in love with people who are good for us. We fall in love with people who activate our unhealed wounds, and we do this unconsciously, repeatedly, until we finally understand what's happening beneath the surface of our consciousness. If you're tired of attracting the same type of pain wrapped in different faces, if you're exhausted from wondering why you always choose people who can't love you the way you deserve, then stay with me, because today we're diving deep into the 6 emotional wounds that Carl Jung identified as the invisible forces driving your romantic choices. These aren't just psychological concepts. These are the actual and conscious patterns that make you say yes to the wrong person and no to the right one. They're the reason you feel butterflies for someone who will eventually make you cry. And they're the reason you feel nothing for someone who would actually cherish you. Think about your last relationship that ended in heartbreak. Really think about it. What attracted you to that person initially? Was it their confidence that bordered on arrogance, their mysterious unavailability, their way of making you feel special one moment and invisible the next? Now think about the person before that and the one before that. Do you see the pattern? This isn't your fault. You're not broken, and you're not choosing poorly on purpose. What's happening is that your unconscious mind is trying to heal old wounds by recreating familiar dynamics. It's like your psyche believes that if you can just get this type of person to love you properly this time, you'll finally heal the original wound. But that's not how healing works. Jung understood something profound about human nature. He knew that we're all walking around with these invisible emotional wounds from our earliest experiences, and these wounds don't just sit quietly in our past. They actively influence every choice we make, especially in love. They create what he called complexes, autonomous parts of our psyche that operate below our conscious awareness but control our behavior. Every time you feel that instant chemistry with someone, your wounded parts are recognizing their wounded parts. It's not love at first sight. It's wound recognition, and until you understand which wounds are driving your choices, you'll keep recreating the same painful dynamics over and over again. I want you to do something right now. Think about the last 3 people you were seriously attracted to. Not just liked, but felt that deep, inexplicable pull toward. Write their names down if you need to. Now think about how each of those relationships made you feel about yourself. Did you feel worthy? Did you feel secure? Did you feel seen and valued? Or did you find yourself constantly trying to prove your worth, walking on eggshells, making excuses for their behavior? If you're recognizing yourself in this, leave a heart in the comments. You're not alone in this journey, and acknowledging these patterns is actually the first step toward breaking free from them. The 6 wounds I'm about to share with you are like emotional blueprints that were created in your earliest years, usually before you even have conscious memories. They were formed during moments when you needed love, safety, or validation but received rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, injustice, or invisibility instead. And here's the thing that will blow your mind. Your unconscious mind is still trying to resolve these original wounds by attracting people who can wound you in the same ways. It's like your psyche thinks, if I can just get someone who reminds me of that original wound to finally choose me, to finally see me, to finally stay, then I'll be healed. But that strategy never works because you can't heal an internal wound through external validation. You can't fix what happened to you as a child by getting an emotionally unavailable adult to suddenly become available. This is why you might find yourself bored by people who are actually good to you. Your wounded parts don't recognize kindness and consistency as love because that's not what love felt like when these wounds were formed. Love felt complicated, conditional, unpredictable. So when someone offers you genuine, uncomplicated love, your wounded parts don't know what to do with it. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've rejected or denied. And one of his most profound insights was that whatever we haven't integrated within ourselves will be compelled to encounter in our relationships. If you've rejected your own neediness, you'll attract needy partners. If you've rejected your own anger, you'll attract angry partners. If you've rejected your own vulnerability, you'll attract people who make you feel vulnerable. The goal isn't to avoid people with wounds, because we all have them. The goal is to become conscious of your own wounds so you can choose from awareness, rather than compulsion. When you understand your patterns, you can start making different choices. When you can see your wounds clearly, you can begin the real work of healing them from within. But first, you need to know what these wounds look like and how they operate in your life. You need to recognize which ones are calling the shots in your romantic decisions, because once you can name them, once you can see them clearly, they lose their unconscious power over you. Let's start with the first wound that might be unconsciously driving your romantic choices. The wound of rejection. This is one of the most painful and common wounds that shapes how we love and who we choose to love. If you carry this wound, you learned very early in life that you weren't wanted, that there was something fundamentally wrong with you that made you unacceptable to the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. The rejection wound is usually formed when a child feels unwanted by their parents, either through direct rejection or through subtle messages that they're a burden, a disappointment, or simply not enough. Maybe you were told you were an accident. Maybe you felt like your parents preferred your siblings, or maybe you just sensed that your existence was somehow inconvenient or unwelcome. Here's how this wound operates in your adult relationships. You're unconsciously attracted to people who are emotionally cold, distant, or unavailable because this feels familiar to your wounded parts. You think you're trying to win their love. But what you're really trying to do is prove to that original, rejecting figure that you are worthy of love. You're trying to heal a childhood wound through an adult relationship. People with rejection wounds often find themselves drawn to partners who are hard to reach, who blow hot and cold, who make them work incredibly hard for even the smallest crumbs of affection. You might find yourself saying things like, "I love a challenge," or "I like the chase." But what you're really saying is, "I'm comfortable with rejection because it's what I know." Do you recognize this pattern? Have you ever found yourself more attracted to someone the moment they became less available? Have you ever lost interest in someone the moment they showed genuine, consistent interest in you? Comment below and let me know, because recognizing this pattern is the first step to changing it. The cruel irony of the rejection wound, that when someone actually wants you, actually chooses you consistently, your wounded parts don't trust it. It doesn't feel like love because love, to your wounded parts, feels like having to prove yourself worthy. Love feels like uncertainty, like walking on eggshells. like never quite being sure where you stand. This is why you might sabotage good relationships or find yourself bored by partners who treat you well. Your rejection wound is addicted to the drama of maybe being chosen, to the high of finally getting attention from someone who doesn't give it easily. But this isn't love. This is trauma bonding. This is your wound trying to heal itself through recreating familiar pain. Now let's talk about the second wound, the wound of abandonment. This wound is formed when you experience the terror of being left alone, either physically or emotionally, by the people you depended on for survival. Maybe a parent left. Maybe they were physically present but emotionally absent. Or maybe you experienced inconsistent care where love was there one day and gone the next. The abandonment wound creates a deep-seated fear that everyone you love will eventually leave you. But here's the paradox. People with abandonment wounds are often unconsciously attracted to partners who are likely to leave or who have one foot out the door from the very beginning. You're drawn to people who can't commit, who have complicated situations, who are geographically unavailable, or who are still hung up on their ex. Think about it. Have you ever found yourself falling for someone who lived in another city, who was married, who was going through a divorce, who just got out of a long relationship, or who explicitly told you they weren't looking for anything serious? Your abandonment wound was activated by their unavailability because it felt familiar, and your unconscious mind thought, if I can just get this person to stay, to choose me over their complications, then I'll finally be safe from abandonment. But what actually happens is that you end up in relationships where you're constantly anxious about being left. You become hyper-vigilant about signs that they're pulling away. You overanalyze every text message, every change in their tone, every moment of distance. You live in a constant state of fear that they're about to abandon you. And ironically, this energy often pushes people away, creating the very abandonment you're trying to avoid. People with abandonment wounds often stay in relationships way too long, even when they're clearly not working, because leaving feels like death to their wounded parts. You'd rather stay in a relationship that's making you miserable than face the terror of being alone. You'd rather accept breadcrumbs than risk having nothing at all. Have you ever stayed in a relationship that you knew was wrong for you because you were terrified of being alone? Have you ever found yourself clinging to someone who was clearly trying to distance themselves from you? This is your abandonment wound in action. And it's keeping you trapped in relationships that can never give you the security you're seeking. The abandonment wound also makes you hypervigilant about other people's moods and needs. You become an expert at reading people, at sensing when they might be pulling away, and you develop elaborate strategies to prevent abandonment. You might become overly accommodating, losing yourself in the relationship to avoid being left. You might become controlling, trying to manage every aspect of the relationship to ensure they don't leave. Or you might become incredibly independent, never asking for anything to avoid the disappointment of being let down. But here's what your abandonment wound doesn't understand. True security in a relationship doesn't come from preventing someone from leaving. It comes from knowing that you'll be okay even if they do leave. It comes from healing the original wound that made abandonment feel like death in the first place. The people who are right for you, the people who can actually give you the security you crave, are usually the ones who feel boring to your abandonment wound. They're consistent, reliable, present. They don't create drama or uncertainty. They don't make you question where you stand with them. But to your wounded parts, this stability doesn't feel like love, because love, to your abandonment wound, feels like the constant fear of loss mixed with the relief of not being left today. Jung understood that these wounds create what he called autonomous complexes, parts of our psyche that operate independently of our conscious will. Your rejection wound isn't just a memory. It's an active force in your life that influences your choices, your attractions, your behaviors, and your fears. Your abandonment wound isn't just something that happened to you, it's something that's happening through you every time you choose someone who can't stay. The beautiful thing about Jung's approach is that he didn't see these wounds as pathology. He saw them as invitations to consciousness. Every time your wound gets activated in a relationship, every time you find yourself falling into these familiar patterns, your psyche is giving you an opportunity to see what needs healing. Your relationships aren't just happening to you, they're happening for you, to show you what parts of yourself are still seeking resolution. The third wound that might be unconsciously controlling your love life is the wound of humiliation. This is perhaps one of the most devastating wounds because it attacks your very sense of self-worth and dignity. The humiliation wound is formed when you're made to feel ashamed of who you are. When your basic needs, emotions, or expressions are met with ridicule, criticism, or contempt, if you carry this wound, you learned early that there was something fundamentally shameful about you. Maybe you were laughed at when you cried, criticized for being too sensitive, mocked for your appearance, your interests, or your dreams. Maybe you were told you were stupid, weird, or different in ways that made you feel like there was something wrong with your core being. Here's how the humiliation wound shows up in your romantic relationships, and this might be hard to hear, but it's crucial that you understand this pattern. You're unconsciously attracted to people who diminish you, who make subtle or not so subtle digs at your self-esteem, who treat you as less than. Your wounded parts mistake this familiar dynamic for a passion or intensity. But what's really happening is that you're recreating the original humiliation in hopes of finally earning respect and dignity from someone who reminds you of your original humiliator. You might find yourself drawn to partners who are condescending, who make jokes at your expense, who criticize your appearance, your choices, or your dreams. You might be attracted to people who are obviously out of your league in conventional terms, people who make you feel grateful that they're even giving you attention. You accept treatment that your friends can't understand, treatment that makes them angry on your behalf, but to you, it feels normal. The humiliation wound makes you believe that you have to earn love through perfect behavior, through making yourself smaller, through accepting less than you deserve. You become hyper-vigilant about doing anything that might invite criticism or mockery. You might find yourself walking on eggshells, constantly checking to see if you're being judged, constantly trying to prove that you're worthy of basic respect. Do you recognize this in yourself? Have you ever stayed with someone who regularly made you feel small or stupid? Have you ever found yourself making excuses for a partner's disrespectful behavior, telling yourself that they're just brutally honest or that they're helping you improve? If this resonates with you, please know that you deserve so much more than this. People with humiliation wounds often become overachievers, trying to prove their worth through external accomplishments. You might excel in your career, have an impressive education, or develop exceptional skills, but none of this external validation heals the core wound that tells you you're fundamentally flawed. And in relationships, you might find yourself attracted to people who can see or appreciate your accomplishments, people who somehow make you feel small despite all your achievements. The humiliation wound also creates a pattern where you're more comfortable giving love than receiving it. Receiving genuine love, appreciation, and respect feels fun and uncomfortable to your wounded parts. When someone treats you with genuine kindness and respect, your humiliation wound might interpret this as pity or as proof that they don't really know you yet. You think, if they really knew me, they wouldn't treat me so well. Now let's explore the fourth wound, the wound of betrayal. This wound is formed when your trust is broken by someone you depended on, usually a parent or primary caregiver. The betrayal wound isn't just about infidelity, though that can certainly create it. It's about having your trust violated in fundamental ways, learning that the people who are supposed to protect you might actually harm you. Maybe you had a parent who made promises they didn't keep, who said one thing and did another, who was loving one moment and cruel the next. Maybe you experienced emotional manipulation, gaslighting, or had your confidences used against you. The betrayal wound teaches you that trust is dangerous, that the people closest to you are the ones most likely to hurt you. Here's how this wound operates in your adult relationships. You're caught in a terrible paradox. Your wounded parts desperately want to trust and be trusted, but they also expect betrayal. This creates a hypervigilant state where you're constantly looking for signs that your partner is lying, cheating, or planning to hurt you. You might become suspicious of innocent interactions, jealous of friendships, or convinced that your partner has hidden motives. But here's the twist that most people don't understand about the betrayal wound. You're often unconsciously attracted to people who are likely to betray you. You might choose partners who are emotionally unavailable, who have a history of infidelity, who are secretive about their past, or who give you legitimate reasons to question their trustworthiness. Your wounded parts are drawn to these people because betrayal feels familiar, and your unconscious mind believes that if you can just get someone untrustworthy to be faithful to you, you'll finally be safe from betrayal. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your fear of betrayal makes you either choose untrustworthy partners or behave in ways that push trustworthy partners away. You might become controlling, checking phones, demanding constant reassurance, or testing your partner's loyalty in ways that create the very betrayal you're trying to prevent. People with betrayal wounds often have difficulty with intimacy because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels dangerous when you expect to be betrayed. You might share pieces of yourself, but never your whole truth. You might create elaborate tests to see if your partner can be trusted with small things before you risk trusting them with bigger things. But this approach keeps you stuck in surface-level connections because real intimacy requires the willingness to be fully seen and potentially hurt. The betrayal wound also makes you hypersensitive to any signs of dishonesty, even innocent ones. If your partner doesn't mention they went to lunch with a coworker, your betrayal wound might interpret this as evidence of deception. If they change their plans or forget to tell you something, your wounded parts might see this as proof that they can't be trusted. Have you ever found yourself going through your partner's phone, checking their social media, or feeling suspicious of their friendships? Have you ever sabotaged a good relationship because you convinced yourself they were going to betray you anyway? This is your betrayal wound in action, and it's keeping you from experiencing the trust and intimacy you actually crave. Jung understood that these wounds create what he called projective identification. We project our internal wounds onto our partners and then react to them as if they were the original source of our pain. Your humiliation wound makes you see criticism where none exists. Your betrayal wound makes you see deception in innocent actions. You are not responding to your partner. You're responding to your wound. The tragic irony is that these wounds push away the very love they're seeking to protect. Your humiliation wound pushes away people who would treat you with respect because respect feels unfamiliar. Your betrayal wound pushes away trustworthy people because their trustworthiness feels boring or suspicious. You end up in relationships that confirm your wounds rather than heal them, and you call this confirmation chemistry or passion. The fifth wound that might be secretly orchestrating your romantic disasters is the wound of injustice. This wound is formed when you experience or witness unfairness, when you're treated in ways that violate your basic sense of right and wrong, when authority figures abuse their power, or when you're punished for things that weren't yours. Fault. The injustice wound creates a deep need for control and order because chaos feels dangerous to your wounded parts. If you carry this wound, you learned that the world is unfair, that bad things happen to good people, that power can be abused, and that you can't rely on others to treat you fairly. Maybe you had a parent who was unpredictably harsh, who had double standards, who blamed you for things beyond your control, or who made decisions that affected your life without considering your feelings or needs. Here's how the injustice wound shows up in your relationships, and this pattern might surprise you. You're either unconsciously attracted to people you can control, or you're attracted to people who try to control you. Both dynamics are your wound's attempt to resolve the original injustice by either ensuring you're never powerless again, or by submitting to someone else's control in hopes that they'll finally treat you fairly. If you're on the controlling side of this wound, you might find yourself drawn to partners who are more passive, younger, less experienced, or somehow dependent on you. You feel safer when you can predict and control the relationship dynamics. You might become the decision maker in the relationship, the one who manages the finances, plans the activities, or determines how conflicts are resolved. You tell yourself you're being helpful or that you're just naturally a leader, but what's really happening is that your injustice wound is trying to prevent being hurt by maintaining control. But control in relationships is an illusion, and your attempts to control often create the very injustice you're trying to avoid. Your partner might start to feel suffocated, resentful, or infantilized. They might rebel against your control or withdraw from the relationship, which your wound interprets as evidence that people can't be trusted to be fair or considerate on the other side. If your injustice wound manifests as submission, you might find yourself attracted to dominating partners who make all the decisions. You think you're attracted to their strength and decisiveness, but what you're really drawn to is the fantasy that someone else will finally take care of things fairly. You hand over your power in hopes that this time, the person in control will use their power justly and in your best interest. But giving away your power to avoid being treated unfairly usually results in exactly the unfair treatment you're trying to avoid. You end up in relationships where your voice doesn't matter, where your needs are secondary, where decisions are made without your input, and when this happens, your injustice wound is triggered. But instead of reclaiming your power, you often try harder to be good enough to deserve fair treatment. Which pattern do you recognize in yourself? Are you the one who needs to be in control? Or are you the one who gives your power away? Maybe you switch between both patterns depending on the relationship. Leave a comment and let me know which side of this wound resonates with you more. The injustice wound also makes you hypersensitive to fairness in relationships. You keep mental tallies of who did what, who gave more, who sacrificed more. You might find yourself saying things like, "I always do this, but you never do that." Or, "It's not fair that I have to be the one who always compromises." You're not just talking about the current situation. You're speaking from a place of accumulated injustice that goes back to your original wound. People with injustice wounds often have difficulty with the natural imbalances that occur in healthy relationships. Sometimes one person gives more, sometimes the other does. Sometimes one person needs more support, sometimes it's the other way round. But your injustice wound interprets these natural fluctuations as evidence of unfairness. And you either try to control the balance or you build resentment about the imbalance. Now let's talk about the sixth and final wound. The wound of invisibility. This might be the most quietly devastating of all the wounds because it's about feeling like you don't matter, like your existence doesn't have impact, like you could disappear and no one would notice or care. The invisibility wound is formed when your emotional needs, your thoughts, your feelings, and your very presence are consistently ignored or dismissed. Maybe you were the quiet child in a chaotic household. The one who learned not to make waves, not to ask for attention, not to express needs because they were consistently overlooked. Maybe you had parents who were physically present but emotionally absent, who never really saw you as an individual with your own thoughts and feelings. Maybe you were the middle child who got lost in the shuffle. Or maybe you learned that the only way to be safe was to be invisible. The invisibility wound creates a terrible paradox in your romantic relationships. You desperately want to be seen, known, and valued for who you truly are. But you're unconsciously attracted to people who don't really see you, who are self-absorbed, distracted, or emotionally unavailable. Your wounded parts mistake being chosen by someone who doesn't really see you for being special. But what's actually happening is that you're recreating the familiar dynamic of being invisible. You might find yourself drawn to partners who are very busy, very focused on their own lives, or who have obvious distractions like demanding careers, addictions, or other relationships. You're attracted to people who make you work hard to get their attention because getting attention from someone who doesn't give it easily feels more valuable to your wounded parts than receiving consistent attention from someone who naturally sees and appreciates you. People with invisibility wounds often become chameleons in relationships, shape-shifting to match what they think their partner wants. You might lose yourself in relationships, abandoning your own interests, opinions, and needs in favor of whatever will keep you visible to your partner. You become an expert at reading other people and giving them what they want. But you lose touch with what you want. The cruel irony is that by trying so hard to be seen, you often make yourself more invisible. When you are constantly adapting to other people's needs and preferences, there's no authentic self left to be seen. You become so focused on not being overlooked that you overlook yourself. Have you ever felt like you could disappear from a relationship, and your partner might not notice for days? Have you ever found yourself attracted to people who are obviously distracted by other things in their lives? Have you ever lost yourself so completely in a relationship that you couldn't remember what you actually liked or wanted? This is your invisibility wound seeking resolution through repetition. Jung understood that these 6 wounds, rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, injustice, and invisibility, don't just influence our romantic choices, they create our entire relational reality. They determine not just who we're attracted to, but how we behave in relationships, what we think love looks like, and what we believe we deserve. But here's what changes everything about this entire conversation. Jung didn't believe these wounds were your destiny. He believed they were your doorway to consciousness, your invitation to become whole. Every time one of these wounds gets activated in a relationship, every time you find yourself falling into familiar patterns of pain, your psyche is offering you a gift. It's showing you exactly what needs to be healed, integrated, and transformed. The key to breaking these cycles isn't to find someone who won't trigger your wounds. That's impossible because every intimate relationship will eventually touch your deepest vulnerabilities. The key is to become conscious of your wounds so you can respond to them differently when they rise. When you can see your patterns clearly, when you can recognize your wound's voice, you can choose a different response. This is what Jung called individuation. The process of becoming who you truly are beneath all the protective strategies and unconscious patterns. It's the journey from being lived by your wounds to consciously choosing how you want to love and be loved. And this journey doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through relationships, through the very triggers and challenges that your wounds create. Let me tell you what integration looks like for each of these wounds, because this isn't just about understanding your patterns. It's about transforming them. If you carry the rejection wound, integration means learning to value yourself regardless of whether others choose you. It means recognizing that someone's inability to see your worth says nothing about your actual worth. It means choosing people who naturally appreciate you rather than people you have to convince to love you when your rejection wound is integrated. You stop needing external validation to feel okay about yourself. You can receive rejection without it confirming your deepest fears about being unlovable. You can walk away from people who don't appreciate you without taking it personally. And paradoxically, when you stop needing others to choose you to feel valuable, you become infinitely more attractive to healthy, available people for the abandonment wound. Integration means developing what Jung called inner security. It means learning that you can be okay even if someone leaves, that your safety doesn't depend on controlling whether people stay or go. It means choosing people who want to be with you rather than people you have to convince to stay. When your abandonment wound is integrated, you can love without clinging. You can be close without losing yourself, and you can handle normal relationship fluctuations without spiraling into abandonment terror. If you carry the humiliation wound, integration means reclaiming your inherent dignity and worth. It means learning that you don't have to earn respect through perfect behavior or by making yourself smaller. It means surrounding yourself with people who naturally see and appreciate your value rather than people who diminish you. When this wound is integrated, you can set boundaries without guilt, you can take up space without shame, and you can receive genuine love and appreciation without suspicion for the betrayal wound. Integration means learning to trust your own judgment and intuition. It means recognizing that not everyone is untrustworthy, and that you can learn to distinguish between people who are worthy of your trust and people who aren't. It means taking calculated risks with your heart rather than either shutting down completely or trusting indiscriminately. When this wound is integrated, you can be vulnerable without being naive. You can trust without being controlling. And you can handle disappointments without having your entire worldview shattered if you carry the injustice wound. Integration means finding the balance between healthy boundaries and rigid control. It means learning that true fairness comes from two people who both care about each other's well-being, not from controlling every aspect of the relationship. It means choosing partners who naturally want to be fair and considerate rather than people you have to force to treat you well. When this wound is integrated, you can share power in relationships. You can handle natural imbalances without keeping score, and you can advocate for yourself without becoming tyrannical. For the invisibility wound. Integration means learning to see and value yourself so clearly that you naturally attract people who see and value you too. It means staying connected to your authentic self even in intimate relationships. It means choosing people who are curious about who you really are rather than people who are too distracted to notice you. When this wound is integrated, you can be yourself without apology. You can ask for what you need without shame. And you can receive attention and appreciation without having to perform for it. Here's what Jung understood that most people miss about healing and relationships. Your wounds aren't obstacles to love. They're the very mechanism through which love deepens and expands every time a wound gets triggered in a relationship. You have a choice. You can react from the wound, recreating the familiar patterns of pain, or you can respond from consciousness, using the trigger as an opportunity to heal and grow. This doesn't mean that every relationship that triggers your wounds is worth staying in. Some relationships are simply incompatible, and some people aren't capable of the kind of love you deserve. But it does mean that every relationship, even the painful ones, even the ones that don't work out, can teach you something valuable about yourself and about what you truly need to thrive. The goal isn't to find someone who never triggers your wounds. The goal is to find someone who, when your wounds inevitably get triggered, responds with curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to grow together. It's to find someone who sees your healing journey sacred rather than inconvenient. Someone who understands that your triggers are information rather than attacks. But most importantly, the goal is to become someone who can hold space for your own wounds with compassion, to become someone who can recognize when your rejection wound is speaking and choose not to listen to its lies about your worth. To become someone who can feel your abandonment wounds terror and still act from love, rather than fear. To become someone who can notice your humiliation wounds shame and still stand in your dignity. Jung had a profound quote that captures the essence of this entire journey. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your romantic patterns aren't fate. They're unconscious programming. And the moment you make them conscious, the moment you can see them clearly, you reclaim your power to choose differently." Which of these 6 wounds resonated most deeply with you? Which patterns did you recognize in your own love story? Share with me in the comments which wound you're ready to heal. Because acknowledging these patterns is the first step toward transforming them. And if this video helped you see something about yourself that you hadn't seen before, please subscribe to this channel for more content about consciousness, healing, and authentic relationships. Remember, you're not broken. You're not choosing poorly on purpose, and you're definitely not alone in this journey of becoming whole. Your wounds have been trying to teach you something profound about what you need to heal and who you're meant to be. Come, it's time to listen.